Hey folks, we're going to look at more context today. We're going to be looking specifically at fleets and how it saves your context and why you want to use fleets and how. So the first thing you'll want to do is set up your effort level to ultra code all the way to the right. And in here, we can explicitly ask Claude to launch a fleet, or when there's a proper task, it can decide to launch a fleet on its own. All right, so I'm just going to ask it to do a research on the upcoming file changes of IFC and to use a fleet to do so. So here we go. So earlier we talked about how the context kind of gets dumber over time and how it needs to be reset so that it can be passed on to a new conversation that will start fresher and smarter. And what we're doing with fleets or with agents, why agents are important is because their inquiries don't affect the context that you're in. So let's say you send an inquiry here through an agent, that agent is going to use its own context, and that context is going to come right back here to your main conversation, to your main work, and not pollute your own context. You're using the context of another agent, meaning you can still have more of that fresh coffee energy in your main agent. And what's actually going to happen a lot of time if you launch a big fleet is that you're going to be launching a fleet that may be sending out like 140 agents to look at all different parts of your code or at a bunch of different compliance metrics and a bunch of things. And then they're going to be cheaper agents sometimes, like if they're just doing internet research or if they're doing something very specific in terms of what they're trained to do. And that's the thing, right? Agents can be trained to be doing just one specific things and have a skill associated with them. So those maybe dumber, cheaper agents will then report back to a smarter agent, and this agent will then do the summary to your main conversation here that keeps going on. So you can start to see how all of these different contexts are being used, whereas normally it would have just been like one continuous context use until it hits the limit, and maybe it needed to go that far and it couldn't. So now in this situation, you're still going only to a certain level with your personal conversation context and offloading all of that context onto the other agents and the swarms or the fleets. So I know I probably said context many times in this video, but I hope this was helpful for you. And I encourage you to use these fleet to do deep audits, to do reconsideration in your projects, or rethinking your workflow, rethinking your philosophy and where you're going in your works. Now, back in Claude, here's what the actual experience of context looks like. So we can see here there's a user interface that's going to open where we can get more information, and we can see how long the agents have been working. They're still working right now. I could stop this fleet, this workflow. And if you're looking for this, you're going to see it right here under the background tasks. And there's the little icon, of course, letting us know what's going on. So it's almost like the main conversation got a consultant and is just waiting for a really nice summarized report from that consultant. And that way it's not having to use its own energy to expand upon all of this researches. It's just going to get the nice executive summary with enough technical detail to implement any changes required at the end of the flow. And we can actually see the pipeline here. So there's the phases, the individual research, then some other agent are going to verify. And actually, that's another level. When you have what's called adversarial agents. So you're going to have two agents arguing against each other as to what's happening. And you can ask for that explicitly, but sometimes it's going to maybe double your amount of work, right? What I like to do in my own products is I say, send a naive agent going through the entire interface, trying every single button, trying to do, let's say, an estimation workflow, and then have that agent report back everything that was not clear, that didn't work, and so forth to the other agent, because the agent whose job is to design all this isn't really motivated to tell himself that he's wrong. Whereas the other one is motivated to say, hey, the product's not working. This wasn't clear. This button, I clicked on it and nothing happened. But this adversarial workflow, because it uses more agents fighting against each other, is very great, but it can cost a lot of tokens. And you're probably noticing this kind of time-based user interface where we get the summary here. We can kind of get an idea of which agents are done or how far they are in their research. And then, of course, expanding it on the right is going to give us more data. And is going through the flow. So some agents are starting to verify. However, I don't think everything at the top has been discovered yet. So it's kind of a granular but still parallelized flow. Now, a lot of our research is done, so we're moving from the research to the verification phase. Interesting. We actually got an error. There's two types of errors you can get on here. There's the API errors where the server for Claude is just too overwhelmed, perhaps because it's in the morning at 9 a.m. And the other type of error is if you run out of credits. So speaking of credits, you can always click on the circle here and you see your two limits. So you see your weekly limit and you see your hourly limit. So in this case, that's going to be resetting in an hour and a half roughly. And I'm at 72. So I'm at an okay rate. I'm pretty much where I'm expected to be 3 hours into the 5-hour session and at 72. So I mean, I'm doing a lot of demos with fleets, so that's probably why we're chugging through tokens close to the limit. And yeah, so there's an error here because of the Claude API being overwhelmed right now. So I'm not sure. Maybe it's not going to retry it. I'm not sure how it's going to move around that limitation, basically. So we're moving down from critique to filling the gaps. I'm guessing that's whatever gaps the critique found in the synthesis. We can see up here how the non-expanded user interface would still look like. So it seems like darker grays when something is done. It'll identify any kind of problems and show you what's running in a blue color. All right, the fleet is done. Now notice how the user interface completely disappeared, right? So that little bubble that was there, it's gone. It's no longer in a trace in the conversation. There's still a trace of it in the background tasks, however, so you can still see it there. But yeah, I mean, sometimes it can be a bit jarring if you're like, oh, I was just doing a fleet and now there's no trace of it. But the conversation is done. And as we mentioned, the biggest part of this is that none of that 30-minute of multi-agent research affected the context of this conversation. So this agent, his coffee cup is still fresh, it's still warm, it's still delicious, and his brain is sharp as heck. So he's ready to go forward. It has affected, of course, the usage of the plan in terms of tokens for the hourly limit, but not what we care about here, which is our context window. So we're ready to do a bunch of work over here. All right, I hope this was useful for you to understand the user interface of the context when we're doing a fleet, and also understand why we would want to use fleets or agents and so forth. Have a good day. Cheers.